Burkina Faso's president, Ibrahim Traoré, recently survived a serious assassination attempt, and now Russian special forces have arrived in the country to ensure his protection. But what prompted Russia to step in during such a sensitive period? Could they be facing a shared adversary? Let's explore that. The political situation in Burkina Faso has become extremely unstable, with President Traoré facing multiple direct threats to his life and authority. A major failed coup attempt has further exposed how precarious things truly are. In response, Traoré has taken a bold step, authorizing the deployment of Russian commandos to safeguard his leadership and key members of his government. This unexpected decision highlights not only a shift in the country's international alliances, but also the lengths to which Traoré is willing to go to defend himself from foreign and domestic enemies. Since assuming power in September 2022, Traoré has encountered constant pressure from both within and outside the country. Insurgent groups continue to operate with little resistance in the Sahel region, turning Burkina Faso into a hotspot for violence and instability. These armed factions are expanding their presence across West Africa, and the Burkinabe government has become one of their primary targets in a bid to exploit the country's political vulnerability. Internally, Traoré's leadership has been challenged by elements within the military and political elite. These factions have repeatedly tried to topple his government, with the latest coup attempt in April 2025 posing the most serious threat yet. According to reports, the operation was meticulously planned and involved both serving and retired military officers in coordination with extremist groups. Their goal was to launch a direct assault on the presidential palace, an effort aimed not just at gaining control, but at dismantling the entire structure Traoré has tried to build. Investigations into the coup uncovered a web of conspirators, some with known connections to foreign interests, hoping to gain influence over Burkina Faso's strategic resources. Although the attempt was thwarted, it marked just one of several serious efforts to remove Traoré from power. Recognizing the gravity of the threat, Traoré moved quickly. For him, protecting his leadership was synonymous with preserving national stability. The arrival of Russian commandos was a calculated decision driven by urgency. These elite forces, trained to manage high-risk security scenarios, were dispatched with a singular mission: to secure the president and uphold the integrity of his government. Russia's military footprint in Burkina Faso marks a new chapter in the country's defense strategy and signals a deepening of strategic ties between the two nations. These Russian special forces are far more than symbolic guards. They are actively engaged in protecting senior government officials, strengthening vital infrastructure, and offering military expertise to Burkina Faso's security forces. Their primary task is to safeguard President Traoré and his top advisors. Their strategic deployment aims to prevent any further assassination attempts and to swiftly neutralize any threats, whether political or military. A major aspect of their mission involves training Burkina Faso's armed forces. The Russian commandos are sharing high-level tactics, counterintelligence skills, and surveillance methods essential for identifying and neutralizing insurgent threats and internal sabotage. This hands-on collaboration is steadily strengthening the country's security system, making it more capable of handling ongoing and future threats. Beyond practical support, this cooperation also symbolizes the deepening alliance between Burkina Faso and Russia. Traoré's decision to invite Russian forces marks a significant shift in foreign policy, moving away from the country's traditional ties with the West, especially France. For years, Burkina Faso was part of France's counter-terrorism strategy in the Sahel, relying heavily on French troops for security. But that relationship has deteriorated. Traoré's government began to view France's presence as more obstructive than helpful. Growing frustration with Western interference, coupled with France's recent military withdrawals from the region, particularly in Mali, contributed to Burkina Faso seeking new alliances. Russia stepped in quickly and willingly. Unlike many Western countries that attach political conditions to military support, Russia has presented itself as a reliable partner to African nations striving for independence from Western influence. Moscow's involvement in Burkina Faso goes beyond just protecting Traoré. It represents a long-term strategy to build lasting influence in the region. Russia is securing its place in the Sahel as Western powers retreat. It's supplying weapons, training, and direct military assistance to nations increasingly disillusioned with Western promises. For Russia, Burkina Faso is a gateway to expanding influence across West Africa. By supporting Traoré's administration, Moscow positions itself not only as a security ally, but also as a regional power broker in the struggle against insurgencies and foreign manipulation. While the deployment of Russian forces is a key step in fortifying Traoré's position, the larger picture remains uncertain. Burkina Faso is still caught in a dangerous loop of extremist violence and political unrest. The coming months will test whether this new partnership can truly bring stability. But one thing is undeniable. The geopolitical landscape of the Sahel is shifting, and Russia is now firmly part of it. The involvement of Russian forces marks a turning point in Burkina Faso's journey, one where the nation is beginning to reclaim control over its own security and redefine its place on the world stage. But this raises an important question. Does Russia genuinely care about Traoré's safety? And if so, why? Add your voice to the total liberation of Africa by leaving a comment in the comments section below. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more informative videos like this one. Let's proceed. Burkina Faso's pivot toward Russia isn't just a matter of urgent strategy. It reflects a broader geopolitical stance. The country is actively distancing itself from Western influence, especially from former colonial powers like France. While choosing Russia as an ally may seem unexpected, it makes more sense when viewed through the lens of shared interests, particularly their mutual opposition to Western interference and exploitation. A major factor behind this growing partnership is the perception that Western countries, especially France, have failed Burkina Faso. Since Captain Ibrahim Traoré assumed leadership in 2022, the country has endured repeated coup attempts, many of which have been linked to foreign influence and Western-backed factions within the military. For many, the West, France in particular, has become synonymous with political manipulation and neo-colonial control, not true partnership. France's long-standing military involvement in the region, such as through Operation Barkhane, was supposed to help fight insurgencies. But instead of improving security, it has often worsened tensions. Many Burkinabés view the French military presence as an occupying force rather than a supportive ally. The perceived failure of these efforts has only deepened mistrust. Russia, by contrast, has presented itself as a more dependable ally, offering practical military assistance without demanding political concessions. This no-strings-attached approach appeals to leaders like Traoré, who are focused on asserting their nation's independence and protecting its sovereignty. Russia's willingness to work as an equal partner, rather than a superior imposing its will, stands in stark contrast to Western attitudes. Moreover, both Burkina Faso and Russia share a common adversary: Western powers that often cloak their geopolitical interests in the language of democracy, human rights, and humanitarianism. For many African leaders, that language no longer holds weight. It's seen as a pretext for controlling African nations and exploiting their resources. Russia, on the other hand, has positioned itself as a global counterweight to Western dominance, supporting a new political order that respects African autonomy. By forming closer ties with Russia, Burkina Faso is doing more than just gaining military support. It's sending a bold message to the West. African nations are no longer willing to be controlled by former colonial powers. This shift toward Moscow is also driven by economic and strategic considerations. Russia has been expanding its footprint across Africa, investing in areas like military training, resource extraction, and infrastructure. Given Burkina Faso's wealth in natural resources, especially gold, Russia's involvement presents an opportunity for the country to channel its riches toward national development, rather than allowing foreign interests to reap the benefits. Russia has consistently positioned itself as an alternative to Western economic dominance, particularly in resource-rich nations. For Burkina Faso, this could mean significant investment in mining, energy, and infrastructure while moving away from dependency on Western aid and financial systems. Beyond economics, this partnership speaks to a deeper desire among African nations to reclaim their identity and escape the lingering shadows of colonialism. Russia's historical stance against Western imperialism, particularly during the Cold War, has made it an attractive partner to countries seeking true sovereignty. Although Russia's own foreign policies are not without controversy, it has successfully framed itself as a nation that respects African independence and offers support without the hidden agendas often tied to Western assistance. This perspective resonates with countries like Burkina Faso, which continue to grapple with the legacy of colonial rule and the ongoing interference of former imperial powers. Still, the partnership with Russia isn't solely about ideology. It's a matter of survival. Burkina Faso, like much of the Sahel, is under siege by insurgent groups and has received minimal effective support from traditional Western allies. Facing a dire security crisis, the Burkinabe government views Russia as a much-needed ally. Moscow's willingness to provide military aid without demanding political concessions makes it an attractive partner for Captain Ibrahim Traoré, whose government sees this relationship as critical to national stability and regime survival. Moreover, the growing presence of Russian forces in Burkina Faso signals a broader shift in the Sahel's geopolitical dynamics. As France and other Western nations pull back, largely due to rising anti-colonial sentiment and grassroots resistance, Russia is stepping into the void. Burkina Faso's pivot could serve as a blueprint for other African countries that wish to reduce their dependency on the West. This could mark the beginning of a larger continental realignment, as more African states explore partnerships with Russia and China, thereby tilting the balance of global influence away from Western powers. But despite the recent success in fending off multiple coup attempts and reinforcing his position with Russian backing, President Traoré still faces a fragile future. The security situation remains tense, and the battle to maintain control of the country is far from over. The intricate landscape of insurgencies, internal strife, and international attention places President Ibrahim Traoré's government in a precarious position, where stability is constantly under threat. The central question now is whether Traoré can build upon his early successes, or if the mounting challenges will ultimately overwhelm his efforts to safeguard Burkina Faso's future. One of the most urgent issues confronting his administration is the persistent threat posed by insurgent groups operating throughout the Sahel. The country has witnessed a surge in attacks targeting civilians, the military, and government institutions, resulting in the displacement of over 1 million people. These militant activities have become a core challenge for Traoré's leadership. His response has included the deployment of Russian special forces, tasked not only with protecting key political figures, but also with supporting counterinsurgency efforts. Yet, the long-term impact of this foreign intervention remains uncertain. While the Russian presence has provided immediate protection and strategic military support, Burkina Faso's lasting security cannot depend solely on outside assistance. The government must tackle the underlying causes of extremism, namely, the absence of basic infrastructure, limited economic opportunities, and weak governance in the most vulnerable regions. Equally critical is the task of national unity. Since coming to power, Traoré has encountered substantial resistance from within various sectors, including political elites, segments of the military, and civil society groups. These internal divisions have been deepened by economic hardship, such as rising living costs and the breakdown of essential services in areas plagued by violence. Although Traoré has garnered support from parts of the population disillusioned with the former pro-Western regime, his administration continues to struggle with broader public confidence. This problem is compounded by Burkina Faso's historical pattern of military coups, which has fostered a climate of political volatility. In such an environment, trust in government remains fragile, and rival factions, particularly within the military, frequently vie for power. The failed coup attempt earlier in 2025 was a stark illustration of this reality. Despite steps taken by Traoré to assert control, the threat of future insurrection remains tangible. Maintaining the loyalty of the military, especially elite units like the Presidential Guard, is essential, but unity within the armed forces is far from guaranteed. Meanwhile, the country's economic condition poses yet another formidable obstacle. Escalating violence has severely hampered economic development, crippling key sectors like agriculture and mining. Although Burkina Faso is rich in gold, an increasingly central pillar of its economy, controversies over corruption and mismanagement have cast doubt on whether these resources truly benefit the population. For Traoré's government, unlocking the full potential of these natural assets is crucial. The administration must ensure that the nation's wealth is used to stimulate long-term development and avoid falling prey to exploitation by foreign interests. In this context, Russia's growing involvement could offer economic advantages, particularly in revitalizing the mining industry and expanding investment opportunities. Russia has demonstrated a keen interest in Africa's natural resources, and its expanding footprint in Burkina Faso may pave the way for increased investment and assistance in critical infrastructure development. However, this partnership will require President Traoré's government to tread carefully. While Russian support could offer economic advantages, Traoré must ensure that control over Burkina Faso's wealth remains in national hands. The country has a long history of foreign exploitation of its resources, and the risk of falling into a new cycle of dependency or external domination remains high. On the global front, Traoré's deepening relationship with Russia is not without potential fallout. Although Moscow has provided military backing and a counterweight to Western influence, the broader geopolitical implications of this alliance are significant. Western nations, particularly France, have voiced unease over Burkina Faso's pivot toward Russia, accusing Traoré of embracing a power with its own strategic ambitions in Africa. As the global balance shifts, with China and Russia expanding their reach on the continent, Western powers are re-evaluating their role in the Sahel. Burkina Faso's decision to distance itself from France could lead to further diplomatic isolation, especially if Western aid and investment begin to dry up. Traoré will have to walk a tightrope, leveraging Russian support while keeping diplomatic channels with the West open, particularly as Burkina Faso still relies on international assistance for economic recovery and development. Nonetheless, amidst the growing challenges, opportunities do exist for a more resilient and independent Burkina Faso. Traoré's government must prioritize reforms that directly benefit the population. Job creation, infrastructure development, and a commitment to human rights must form the core of his strategy to win lasting public support and address the root causes of unrest. Maintaining national sovereignty while constructively engaging with both emerging and established global powers will be essential to securing long-term peace and prosperity. So, what do you think? Can Captain Ibrahim Traoré's strategy rescue Burkina Faso and ensure his survival? Or is he steering the nation into dangerous waters? Share your thoughts in the comments. Can anyone defeat Traoré? Tell us what you think in the comments section below.